An old man stands on the limestone ridge of Mount Nebo, the wind pulling at his heavy robes, a legal document designed to police behavior. But if you look closer at the structure of the address, at the desperate rhythm of the Hebrew words he chooses, Moses is not trying to scare them into a perfect performance. He knows the performance is doomed. He knows the human heart is fractured. He knows the soft comfort of the promised land will eventually rot their dependence on the God who gave it to them. So he does something unprecedented in ancient Near Eastern politics. He tells them what happens after the empire destroys them. A Hittite warlord would wipe out a rebellious vassal and erase their name from the earth. He would salt their fields. He would burn their records. The treaty would be void in blood. There is no grace in a political contract. But the God of Israel writes a loophole into the apocalypse. Moses tells them that when they are sitting in the dirt of exile, when the stone walls are broken and the temple is burning, they can still return. They can still find the God who scattered them. But the mechanism for their return is not a sacrifice. It is not a temple ritual. When the exile comes, they will not have an altar to bleed on anymore. The mechanism for their survival is found in a command he already gave them back in chapter 6. A command about how they are supposed to feel. The survival mechanism is buried in the very next breath. Right after Moses tells the people to Shema, to hear and obey, he issues the demand. You start to see something the legal reading completely misses. Deuteronomy is not a rulebook for a successful nation that will hold them together when the empire falls apart. Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. The word your English Bible translates as love is the Hebrew ahava. In our modern Western minds, love is an internal condition. It is a warmth in the chest. It is a chemical reaction, an involuntary feeling that washes over you. You fall in love. You fall out of love. We treat it like the weather. Biblical Hebrew does not care about your internal weather. The root of ahava is built around a two-letter kor hav, which literally means to give. In the ancient Hebrew imagination, love is not a feeling you harbor in the dark. It is fundamentally linked to action, to offering, to the physical movement of resources, from one hand to another. But when you place ahava into the structure of a suzerain vassal treaty, the word takes on a terrifying weight. In the geopolitics of the ancient Near East, love is a legal term. When an Assyrian emperor drafts a treaty, he explicitly demands that the vassal love him. He is not asking the conquered king to feel a warm, fuzzy affection in his chest when the emperor's name is read aloud. He does not care about the vassal's emotional state. He is demanding fierce, unwavering covenant loyalty. To ahava the suzerain, it is a survival manual for a generation he knows is going to fail. Moses is not speaking to the people who walked through the parted sea. Is to load heavy sacks of tribute grain onto wagons and deliver them on time. It is to pick up a bronze sword and bleed, to defend the empire's borders. It is to refuse to make backroom deals with the rival armies of Egypt or Babylon in the shadows. Ahava is not an emotion you happen to feel. It is an allegiance you deliberately enact. When the God of Israel commands this ragged family to love him, he is demanding absolute exclusivity. He is demanding that they do not hedge their bets. When they step into Canaan and the rain stops falling, they must not slaughter a goat for the local storm god Baal, just in case. When the winter is coming and the stone floor is cold, they must not carve a fertility idol out of wood and bow to it in the dark. They must hold the line. This linguistic reality changes how you read their future exile. When they are eventually scattered in Babylon, sitting in a foreign city with no temple, no high priest, and no blood soaking into a bronze altar, they can still ahava their God. Because loyalty does not require a building, it only requires a choice. But Moses knows human loyalty is incredibly fragile. He knows the human mind adapts to comfort. He knows that within 3 generations, the memory of the fire on the mountain and the taste of the manna will fade into a myth. They will forget who. That generation is dead. Their bones are buried in the sand behind him. He is speaking to their children. They are, which means they will forget who God is. So he gives them one final, desperate tool. He gives them a mechanism for time travel. Moses stares at the children of the dust. He knows they will build houses of cut stone. He knows their stomachs will be full of heavy grain. He knows prosperity will act like a narcotic. So he gives them a weapon to fight the amnesia. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2, he commands them to look backward. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness. The word he shouts into the wind is the Hebrew verb zakar. In English, remembering is a quiet mental exercise. It is a file pulled from a dusty cabinet in the brain. You can remember your childhood home while sitting completely still in a chair. It is an internal flicker of data. But ancient Hebrew does not do quiet mental exercises. Zakar is an action. It is physical. It is the act of dragging a past event into the present moment. The root appears over 200 times in the text, and it is almost always tied to sudden movement. When God remembers Noah, locked in a wooden ark, he sends a violent wind to dry the flooded earth. When God remembers Rachel in her barrenness, he opens her womb. Zakar is not a nostalgic thought. A generation raised on manna that tasted like honey. A generation that only knows the blinding heat of the desert. It is a past reality forced into present existence. Moses tells them to zakar the desert. They cannot just think about their history. They have to reenact it. They must build fragile booths of thin branches and sleep under the cold stars once a year. They must chew bitter herbs that burn the back of the throat. They must tear flat, unleavened bread that snaps in their hands. They have to taste the slavery. They have to feel the dirt under their fingernails. They have to put the divine rescue back into their own muscles and bones. Because memory is the only thing that will keep them alive. When the Babylonian Empire eventually attacks, when the stone walls of Jerusalem are reduced to rubble, when they are scattered in the ashes of their own rebellion, just as Moses predicted, the memory of the desert will be the seed of their return. They survived the wilderness once. They can survive it again. But how does a modern mind apply a 3,000-year-old desert protocol? We do not live in the desert. We do not sleep in booths of woven branches or drag stone tablets through the sand. But if you are in a season where you feel like you are walking in endless circles, Deuteronomy is a book you need to open, and the pillar of fire that kept them warm in the dark. He looks at them, and he knows exactly what is going to happen, because we all know what it feels like to be caught in the 40-year delay. We know the exhaustion of waiting for the straight line that never comes. We know the creeping suspicion that our wilderness season is actually a divine punishment. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The 40 years were not a sentence. They were a formation. God did not keep them in the wilderness because he hated them. He kept them in the wilderness because he knew exactly what the prosperity of the promised land would do to a slave's heart. He was waiting for the Egypt inside of them to die. If you are stuck in a holding pattern, if your career feels stalled, if a relationship remains broken, if a prayer has gone unanswered for so long, you can hardly remember the sound of your own voice asking for it. Consider the possibility that God is not punishing you. He might be forming you. He might be waiting for the slave mentality, the desperate need to prove your worth, the hoarding of resources, the terror of not being enough to finally die in the sand. He might be building the ahava, the fierce covenant loyalty that you will desperately need when the promise is finally fulfilled. Because the comfort of the answer is always more dangerous than the hunger of the wilderness. You need the hunger to teach you how to survive the feast. He knows they will cross the river. He knows they will build cities they did not plan, and eat from vineyards they did not plant. So you have to zakar. You have to actively drag his past rescues into your present panic. You cannot just wait to feel loved. You have to enact your loyalty, even when the sky feels like bronze and the rain turns to dust. Because the journey is not an error, an old man stands on the limestone ridge, looking at a river he will never cross, speaking to a generation he knows will eventually fail, but he does not speak in despair. He spends his final breath giving them the tools to survive their own impending ruin. The journey was mapped for 11 days, and it stretched into 40 years of deep formation. An ancient empire demanded cold tribute, and the God of Israel demanded a surrendered heart. The command to hear vibrated the air, and it became the full-body reflex of obedience. The word for love felt like an emotion, and it forged the fierce loyalty of a covenant. The prophet promised horrifying destruction, and he embedded a loophole of grace for the exile. A comfortable generation was told to remember, and they built fragile shelters to resurrect the past. And he knows, with terrifying certainty, that in their comfort, they will forget the God who gave it all to them. A ragged family stepped into a land that would induce amnesia, and they carried a text that would bring them back to life. Same desert, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the man on the mountain. Moses is not allowed to enter the land. He is staring at the green water, knowing his life's work is ending, knowing the people he carried will eventually build idols of wood and stone and trigger their own exile. And yet, he does not give up on them. He builds a treaty not just for their success, but for their survival in the ashes. If you are in a season where your own failures feel inevitable, where you look at your own heart and see a fractured allegiance, Deuteronomy is a place to sit. The text does not expect perfection. It expects failure, and it provides a way back. You do not have to perform your way out of the desert. You just have to shema. You just have to listen. And let your hands follow. And may the God who has never once wasted a wilderness walk with you through yours and bring you out carrying something you could not have received any other way. The real question of this book isn't, what are the rules? It is this: how do you keep a people tethered to heaven when their feet finally touch the ground? To find the answer, you have to understand the geography stretching out behind them, staring down at a ribbon of green water he will never cross. Below him, 2 million people are breaking camp. You have to look at the map of where they have been, because the distance between the mountain where they first received the covenant and the river where they are standing right now is not vast. In fact, the text tells us exactly how long the journey was actually supposed to take: 11 days. That is the explicit distance recorded in the second verse of Deuteronomy. It is the geographic measurement. From Mount Sinai to the edge of the Promised Land, 11 days of walking, 11 sunrises burning off the desert chill, 11 nights wrapping woven cloaks tight against the wind. It is a short trip, a straight line, but the journey did not take 11 days. It took 14,600 days, 40 years of walking in endless, deliberate circles, 40 years of digging graves in the limestone dust, 40 years of burying a father, an uncle, a mother, until an entire generation was swallowed by the wilderness. 40 years of gathering the exact same flakes of manna off the frost. 40 years of waking up, staring at a towering pillar of smoke, and waiting for it to lift. The 40 years were not a navigational error. They were a theological quarantine. We are a species obsessed with the straight line. We want the 11-day route. We demand the shortest distance between a promise and its fulfillment. You can hear the wooden tent poles clattering against the dry earth, the bleating of livestock, the low murmur of a nation preparing to march. We look at our own wilderness seasons, the years where nothing seems to move, the careers that stall, the healing that drags out, and we assume we have missed the map. We assume we are being punished. But God is not a logistics manager. He is a father raising a family. When that first generation stood at the border of the land 38 years earlier, they looked across the valley. They saw the fortified walls. They saw the men of Anak, giants who made the Israelites feel like grasshoppers in their own sight. The fear gripped their chests. They picked up stones to throw at Moses. They begged to go back to the brickyards of Pharaoh. They were physically out of Egypt, but Egypt was not out of them. Their slave mentality was still completely intact. A slave cannot inherit a kingdom. A slave only knows how to survive the day, how to hoard scraps, how to flinch when a shadow moves. If you take 1 million traumatized slaves and hand them a holy land, they will not build a light to the nations. They will simply build a new Egypt. They will just enslave each other. So God stopped the march. He turned them around. he sent them back into the heat. He waited for the slave mentality to literally die off in the sand. They are standing on the edge of the Jordan River. They are standing on the edge of the promise. He waited for a generation that had never felt the sting of an Egyptian whip across their backs. A generation whose only memory was depending on bread falling from heaven and water bursting from a rock. That is the generation standing before Moses on Mount Nebo. But Moses knows that being born in the wilderness does not make you immune to the idols of the city. He knows that prosperity is far more dangerous to their souls than poverty ever was. They need a framework. They need an anchor to survive the comfort that is coming. He has to give them a constitution for this new world. But the detail that changes how you read the entire book is where Moses gets the structure for this speech. He doesn't invent it. He borrows it from the enemy. Picture the ancient Near East, centuries before Rome or Greece even exist. A Hittite warlord rides his chariot into a conquered Canaanite city. The heavy wooden wheels crush the dry earth, and the surviving citizens drop to their knees in the dust. He has defeated them, but he does not wipe them out. Instead, his scribes bring out slabs of wet clay. He has spent 40 years dragging this family through the wasteland. He has shattered stone tablets in anger and press a wedge-shaped stylus into the mud, drafting a very specific, universally recognized document. It is called a suzerain vassal treaty. In the ancient world, when a great emperor, the suzerain, conquered a lesser nation, the vassal he established a binding contract. The structure of these treaties was rigid and identical across the empires of the ancient Near East. First, the emperor states his name and titles. Second, he lists the historical prologue, recounting all the benevolent things he has done for the conquered people to justify his rule. Third, he lays out the stipulations they must follow to stay alive. Fourth, he lists the economic blessings for obedience and the gruesome, violent curse for rebellion. And finally, they slaughter animals, walk between the bloody pieces, and call on the gods to witness the pact. It is a document forged in the metallic smell of blood and the cold reality of empire. And it is exactly the blueprint Moses uses on Mount Nebo. When scholars map the structural outline of Deuteronomy, they do not find a standard religious text. They find a perfect, step-by-step mirror of a 13th century BC suzerain treaty. Moses opens by declaring the name of the king, Yahweh. He recounts the history of the king's protection, bringing them out of the brickyards of Egypt. He lays out the stipulations, the laws of the land. He spends chapters listing the blessings and the curses. He has ground golden idols into powder. He has pleaded with the divine not to wipe them off the face of the earth. He even explicitly calls heaven and earth to stand as witnesses. Moses is adopting the political language of the empires that surround them, but he is subverting it from the inside out. In a Hittite or Assyrian treaty, the suzerain demands compliance through sheer terror. The emperor does not care what the vassal feels in his chest. He does not care if the vassal loves him. He only cares that the tribute grain is paid and the borders are secure. He demands cold, mechanical submission. Deuteronomy is not a diplomatic surrender to a distant tyrant. It is an invitation to an intimate allegiance. The God of Israel takes the most terrifying geopolitical contract of the ancient world, hollows it out, and fills it with an expectation no ancient emperor would ever dare demand from a peasant. He demands their devotion. To see the shocking difference, you only have to look at the exact center of the treaty, a paragraph Jewish people still recite every morning and every night. And it all hinges on a single Hebrew word. Moses reaches the center of the treaty. He does not ask for taxes. He does not demand tribute grain. He demands their ear. The text is brutal in its finality. He will die on this mountain alone. But before they step into the water, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. It is the most famous passage in the entire Hebrew Bible. Jewish people have bound it to their foreheads, attached it to their doorposts, and whispered it with their dying breath in the shadows of gas chambers and on the ashes of burning temples. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The word your English Bible translates as "hear" is the Hebrew Shema. but it does not mean what an English speaker thinks it means. In our modern Western minds, hearing is a passive, acoustic event. It is just sound waves vibrating against an eardrum. You can hear a siren on the highway and choose not to pull over. You can hear an alarm ring in the dark and press snooze. You can hear a desperate request and completely ignore it. In English, you have received the auditory information, even if you do nothing about it. In ancient Hebrew, this separation does not exist. In biblical Hebrew, there is actually no independent, separate word for obey. The word for obedience is simply shema. The language itself does not allow you to divorce the act of listening from the physical act of doing. If an Israelite father tells his son to gather wood for a fire, and the son does not do it, Moses raises his hands and halts the procession. He has one last speech to make. This speech is the book of Deuteronomy. The ancient Hebrew father would not say the son was disobedient. He would say the son did not shema. If you have not acted, you have not heard. When Jesus stands on a dusty hillside centuries later and says, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear," he is pulling on this exact linguistic thread. He is not asking if their auditory nerves function. He is asking if their hands and feet will move. If something about peeling back these ancient languages is stirring up a hunger you haven't felt in a long time, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So Moses looks at a generation about to cross the river, and he tells them to shema. He is not asking them to passively absorb theological data. He is telling them that true listening is a full-body reflex. To shema, the cry of the widow is to open your hand and give her flour. To shema, the warning of the prophet is to drop to your knees in the dirt. To shema, the covenant is to fundamentally change the way you harvest your wheat and treat your slaves. The shema is not a request for their attention. It is a demand for their alignment. But Moses knows that behavioral alignment alone is not enough. You can force obedience. You can fake compliance out of sheer terror. Most people assume Deuteronomy as a law book. They read it as a dry, exhausting ledger of ancient rules about mildew, property lines, and fabric blends. And so, in the very next breath, Moses couples this word with something far more dangerous. He tells them what they must do with their chest. The wind picks up on the limestone ridge. Moses lowers his voice. He lays out the final terms of the treaty. Deuteronomy chapter 28 is terrifying. It is a rapid-fire barrage of alternate futures. First, he describes the blessing of obedience, rain falling in its proper season, kneading bowls overflowing with heavy dough, enemies charging from one direction and fleeing in 7. But then he pivots. He describes the curse of rebellion. The imagery is visceral. The sky above their heads turning to solid bronze, the rain turning to fine powder and choking dust, a foreign nation with strange weapons, speaking an ugly, unrecognizable language, the sound of heavy boots kicking in their wooden doors, the cold yoke of iron locked onto their necks. Most people read this as a conditional threat, a divine ultimatum. But Moses keeps speaking. He reaches chapter 30, and he shifts from conditional warnings to prophetic certainty. He tells them they will fail. He tells them they will break the treaty. He tells them the curses will actually fall. They will be driven out. They will be scattered among the nations. They will serve gods of wood and stone that they cannot feel, see, or hear. These chapters are not a list of possibilities. They are a prophetic guarantee.